Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm Kim Annealy, Senior Managing Director at IAOP. Thank you for joining today's webinar on impact sourcing. Before we get started, I know we have a lot of new people on the call today, so I just wanted to take a minute to introduce IAOP to those of you who might not know about us. I'll be quick because I know we have a lot of ground to cover today. First and foremost, at our core, we're the association that brings together customers, providers, and advisors to collaborate, ultimately to improve business service models and outsourcing outcomes. We do this through a ton of networking opportunities like conferences, face-to-face chapter meetings. We connect our members through our online community, Connect IAOP. Tons of education and learning opportunities, such as our training and certification program, the Certified Outsourcing Professional. I'm sure some of you on this call have taken the COP Masterclass. And webinars like this. We offer about 100, up to nearly 100 networking opportunities like this over the course of a year. If you're not a member, I encourage you to become one today. You'll have full access to all of that. If you are a member, of course, thank you for your continued support and contribution. You know, we couldn't do it without you. You can always get more information about IAOP and the kinds of things we're doing at iaop.org, or contact me directly with any questions. I'll put my email address into the chat on the left in just a minute in case anyone has any questions. And if we have time at the end, I'll spend a minute or two on just some of the things we're working on here that we're excited about. One small housekeeping item before I hand it over to IAOP's CEO, Debbie Hamill. You are all muted. That's just for obvious reasons, but you can chat, and we do want to take your questions. So you can see on the left-hand side of your screen, there's an attendee chat. Put your questions in there, your comments, your feedback, anything at any time, and the speakers will take that information and those questions at the appropriate time. Thank you again for joining us, and at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Debbie Hamill.
Thanks, Kim. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the first of what I hope will be many opportunities to bring us all together on this important topic. As you may know or not know, IAOP has been a champion of impact sourcing since first becoming involved with the Rockefeller Foundation many years ago. Since then, we've had the wonderful opportunity to work with the foundation, and as a result, part of IAOP's mission is to collaborate with others to promote impact sourcing on a global scale and to educate our members and the industry at large on the topic by providing a forum whenever and wherever possible for continued discussion on this socially responsible business model that truly benefits all of us. In that regard, there are several impact sourcing initiatives going on right now at IAOP that will do just that. First will be the launch of our new CSR committee with a special focus on impact sourcing. This committee will also provide the core of the judging panel for our newly announced Global Impact Sourcing Award. This award, in partnership with the Rockefeller Foundation, will recognize industry professionals who are leaders in impact sourcing and will be presented annually at the Outsourcing World Summit. We'll start accepting nominations in July, so please stay tuned for the announcement. And by the way, and John will talk about this a little more later, I think, John Browning, thank you very much, will be heading up that committee as well as the judging panel. In addition, we are developing an impact sourcing chapter, and I hope you'll all find that interesting and want to get involved. And this chapter will provide the platform for more presentation and discussion of impact sourcing best practices and success stories. So I really do urge you to find out about how you can get more involved in this and the other initiatives. And to tie all of this together, we at IAOP, along with many of you on this call, are pleased to have joined the Global Impact Sourcing Coalition. And with that, it is now my pleasure to introduce you to Martin Benderson, who is part of the coalition support team at BSR. Martin, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Debbie. So I'm Martin Benderson with BSR, and as Debbie said, we are the Secretariat of the Global Impact Sourcing Coalition. We're happy to be here today and to have this opportunity to co-host this webinar together with IAOP. We'll be spending the next 45 minutes or so digging deeper into the topic of impact sourcing. So we will be introducing you to what impact sourcing is, how it's done by some of our member organizations, and what value it brings to companies who are investing in impact sourcing, both from a social impact perspective, but also from a business perspective. Finally, we will be talking about the Global Impact Sourcing Coalition. We'll be introducing you to this new initiative, what we're up to, and actually also how you can join and participate in the coalition. For those of you who have questions, feel free to raise your hand. We're happy to take questions as we go along. There will also be a slot at the end of the session for raising more substantial questions and so on. But do raise your hand if you do have any concerns or questions. Before we get started, I would like to remind everyone that we are running this session under Chatham House rules. And this means that you are free to share the information that you receive during this session, but you're not free to reveal the identity of the source of that information. And we use Chatham House rule to create a safe space and also to encourage companies on this call to freely share and have an open discussion about impact sourcing. Moving on to introductions. The Global Impact Sourcing Coalition is run by a fantastic team consisting both of BSR and the Rockefeller Foundation. So before I go on to presenting BSR and our role on this initiative, I would like to hand over to John Browning from the Rockefeller Foundation, who will give a short introduction to Rockefeller's history with this initiative and also present the Rockefeller team. Over to you, John.
Great, thanks, Martin. Hello, everybody. I'm John Browning, and I'm glad to be here with you today. Just to note about the Rockefeller Foundation's involvement. In 2011, the foundation launched the Digital Jobs Africa Initiative, and it was designed to create job opportunities for youth in high areas of employment, originally starting with 6 African nations. The focus has been not only on the creation of new jobs, but helping youth to get the training and coaching needed to be able to qualify for these jobs and be successful in them. I've been very glad to partner closely with the foundation over the past 4 years on this effort. And our goal is to drive awareness and assist companies in launching this hiring practice. We found the BPO industry to be a great candidate for this effort because of the large number of entry-level positions that can actually grow into career jobs over time. And this is why most of the Rockefeller Foundation's efforts today are focused on the BPO industry for this specific initiative. This grew into a larger effort, and in 2016, the project expanded to become the Global Impact Sourcing Initiative, no longer just focused on Africa, because this gives us an opportunity to work with the larger BPO industry and deploy impact sourcing on a global scale. We found that there are many BPO providers and buyers and supporting organizations that want to help with these goals and find out how their companies can be part of the initiative. So in partnership between Rockefeller Foundation and BSR, the Global Impact Sourcing Coalition was established. And Martin is going to further explain the goals of the strategy for the coalition.
Right, thank you very much, John. So yes, as you heard, my name is Martin Benderson and I work for BSR. We are a global non-for-profit organization working with the private sector on a range of sustainability topics. We specialized in facilitating collaborations and partnerships between companies on specific sustainability topics. And in the case of the Global Impact Sourcing Coalition, we have been hired to be the secretariat of this initiative. This means that we are running the daily operations of the secretariat, but we're also providing strategic advice to the membership, the Rockefeller Foundation, and overall setting the strategic direction of this initiative. I'm based in Copenhagen, in Denmark, where we have our Nordic office. With me on this call, I also have my colleague Sarah Enright from our New York office, who is leading this initiative from BSR's side. Sarah, I don't know if you would like to say a few words just to introduce yourself. Yeah, it seems like there are some sound issues there for Sarah. So just to say that Sarah has been leading this initiative from the start. She's the project manager on this based in New York. And we also have our senior vice president from BSR, Mr. Peter Michael Rusan Jorgensen, who is providing more senior strategic direction for this initiative. With us, we also have my colleague Anna de Vries, who is the coordinator and managing member engagement and so on for this team. So we have the fantastic team on board, and together with Rockefeller and John and Tracy and also Mamadou, we are very excited to be part of the setting this up. So let me speak a bit briefly about the Global Impact Sourcing Coalition and how the membership currently looks. On the slide here, you can see the current members of this initiative. And we have grown quite rapidly since we launched the initiative back in September last year. So we're currently at around 40 member organizations. The GISC welcomes into its membership influential global buyers and providers of business service, as well as stakeholders who are committed to impact sourcing. We have initially focused on the global business process outsourcing industry, but this is actually a sector-agnostic initiative. So we're also looking at expanding into other sectors beyond the BPO sector. And as you can see on the slide here, we have two different categories of membership. So we firstly have regular members consisting of companies who are either providing or buying impact sourcing services. And on the right side, you have a box with the associate members. And these are industry association, in universities, non-for-profit organizations, or other organizations who are part of the impact sourcing ecosystems, but are not actually providing or buying impact sourcing services. Currently, we have about 20 major BPO buyers and suppliers in the network. The GISC consists of some founding members from companies such as Vodacom, Nielsen, Teleperformance, Sutherlands, and Arvato, and many more. And we are primarily engaging with the procurement and sustainability executives within these organizations. And we welcome companies who are both already implementing and practicing impact sourcing, and those who are actually new to this practice and coming on board to learn from peers and actually invest in impact sourcing. Finally, I would also like to make a point about that this coalition is really about scaling impact sourcing and creating a community of practice around impact sourcing. This is not intended as a business matchmaking platform. We have a non-solicitation policy when we meet, so that is not the purpose. Rather, the purpose is to share best practices and learn from peers, and together jointly develop tools and see how we as a coalition can scale impact sourcing as an inclusive hiring practice. So moving on to impact sourcing, I would now like to just spend some time to discuss what impact sourcing is. One of our first tasks as a coalition was to come up with a definition that the Global Impact Sourcing Coalition would use for impact sourcing. This term has been around for many years. However, there were a number of different definitions out in the marketplace. So we put together a working group consisting of the members of GISC. And together we have agreed to define impact sourcing as an inclusive employment practice through which companies in global supply chain intentionally hire and provide career development opportunities to people who otherwise have limited prospects for formal employment. And so there are a few components to this definition. First of all, we have agreed to a quite broad definition that would capture a number of different groups that are far away from the labor market. So this would mean that impact workers are defined as, for example, long-term unemployed. This could be first-time workers who haven't been part of the formal labor market, or it could be workers who haven't been part of the formal labor market at all, but been working in the informal labor market, which is primarily a case in many emerging economies and also developing countries. This means that groups such as youth, people with disabilities, and also minorities that are far away from the labor market or marginalized would be categorized as impact workers using this definition. The second component of this definition is also around career development. So what this definition says is not just about hiring certain people from a group, but also providing some career development opportunities, making sure that workers are progressing in their career, and also actually reporting on the impact you see from the career development of these individuals. Let me also talk a bit about the business case for impact sourcing. One of the goals of the Global Impact Sourcing Coalition is to gather evidence to develop the business case for impact sourcing. And there are already several studies out there to demonstrate how impact sourcing is driving economic and social progress. So I would like to speak a bit about the business case and what key benefits to business companies are reporting from using impact sourcing. First of all, companies who are investing in impact sourcing see this as a strategic way to access new sources of talent, to expand into new market, and also to diversify their outsourcing portfolio. There's also been numerous studies on the performance of impact sourcing. And these have shown that impact workers, compared to their peers, they have actually lower absentees, they have lower attrition rate, and they are more engaged and motivated in the workplace. There are, for example, studies showing that the impact worker has between 15 to 40% lower attrition rate than a traditional worker. There's also a cost-saving element to this. Impact sourcing provides quality and cost at parity with traditional employment practices and often results in cost savings in the long term due to reduced turnover and heightened employee engagement. And this has been shown by several studies, and that's also one of the key messages from the coalition, that impact sourcing provides quality and cost at parity with traditional employment. Finally, we see many companies investing in this practice as a way to meet their goals on corporate citizenship, sustainability, and to promote diversity in their supply chain, diversity in their workforce, and also to meet local content regulations. So there's a number of ways that impact sourcing actually touches on business value to the company. As important as the business case is also the social impact we see from impact sourcing. And also in this field, there are a number of studies showing the socio-economic impact that impact sourcing is generating. At an individual level, we obviously see a lot of income growth from people who have previously been far away from the labor market. We see research that's showing that impact workers benefit from increases in income up to 200%. In the longer perspective, we see that these individuals have greater career opportunities. They achieve transferable skills that can serve as a springboard for future job opportunities, and also their long-term career advancements, and over time, their salary levels is going up. So this obviously has great impact on poverty reductions and also on social security. So on a family level, we see that impact workers, they are investing more in health, they are investing more in housing, they're investing more in food and education for their family. So overall, it provides a better social safety net to these individuals. At the community level, we also see that not only that unemployment rates are going down, but also that the job opportunities created through impact sourcing creates an injection of local spending into the local economy that can trigger more local economic growth and so on. And so there's also a good case here from the social side of impact sourcing showing that it has an impact, and we're very glad to work with companies on further building the case for impact sourcing. And let me just end with this slide here before we stop. our members are also reporting that they see a lot of value in impact sourcing, and these quotes here from Microsoft and also GISC illustrates how impact sourcing is a way to access new pools of talents, and also how impact workers are actually providing quality and cost at parity with traditional workers. Let me stop here and see if there are any immediate questions that we should take now. No? If there are no further questions, then I would like to see if I could hand over to Carla Nolan from Teleperformance.
Hello, this is Carla Nolan here from Teleperformance.
Thanks, Carla.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you well. Please continue.
Oh, okay, fantastic. All right, so I am not able to see the slides on the same page that you are on. So if someone will guide me to what slide number we're on, I'll make sure that I keep in sync with the conversation. Is that fair?
Yes, I can flip the slides for you. So I'm starting now on your first slide.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for allowing me to speak to you today about impact sourcing at Teleperformance. So I'll move on to the fourth slide and give you a quick introduction to myself and my role here at Teleperformance and how important impact sourcing has been to our business strategy and growth. I am Carla Nolan, as she introduced me. I am the Senior Vice President of Human Resources here at Teleperformance USA. I joined Teleperformance about a year and a half ago to come lead up their human resources function in the U.S. To the right of the screen here, these are our company values. Like to showcase those any chance we get because they are the core of everything we do here at Teleperformance. So I'll move on to slide 6, just give you a bit of a view of what we do here at Teleperformance and how impact sourcing is part of that. So as you can see, we cover much of the globe, and what we offer to our potential clients and existing clients is the opportunity to make sure we find the right location for them. We offer domestic, nearshore, offshore, work-at-home opportunities. And you can see here in green that are the countries in which we operate, and the lighter green are the countries in which we serve. So later in the presentation, we're going to focus on some success stories of impact sourcing hires in our Mexico region. So we'll move on to slide 7. And just a few more key facts about Teleperformance. We have been around 4 decades, 265 languages we serve. We're present in 74 countries. That's where impact sourcing has been key for us, really expanding our footprint. And to date, we've got 217,000 employees. And moving on to slide 8, the most interesting statistic to me personally about Teleperformance is that we interact with more than 40% of the world's population every day. And that is via voice, email, chat, click-to-call, social media, video chat, face-to-face, and other channels, depending on what our clients need. And our impact sourcing hires touch nearly every one of those channels. The map here kind of just shows you how Teleperformance is split up regionally. And then let's move right into the core of impact sourcing at Teleperformance. So this graphic may look familiar to you. It is from the GISC operating charter. But the definition we use here at Teleperformance for impact sourcing is disadvantaged youth or disabled youth in socioeconomically challenged regions under the age of 26 without a college education. So we define it very clearly so it's easy for us to measure and track and follow the success of these hires. So similar to what you've heard from the others in the GISC, we have experienced lower costs in setting up in new areas where impact sourcing hires are a big portion of what we do in a lot of our startups. And that lower training cost has shown to be proven to be true for us. We have a big corporate social responsibility here at Teleperformance. I would encourage you to check out our website and learn more about what we do. But very proud of that, and our impact sourcing contributes to that as well. So not only are we fulfilling some of our corporate social responsibility initiatives, but we are also helping that particular region in which we're coming newly into their communities and countries. We have found that we can get to hitting our KPIs and SLAs quicker. The training has been more successful, and therefore our startups have been very successful in these regions. We've also experienced a much more stable workforce in these regions, better attendance rates, lower attrition rates, and high job satisfaction. And the good news is that there's a large untapped pool still of impact sourcing potential hires, and about 12% of the BPO global market. So still a lot of opportunity here. Moving on to slide 11, if you've not had a chance to check out some of the white paper information on the GISC website, I'd encourage you to do so. You can read more about this particular case out there as well. But wanted to highlight that we here at Teleperformance have been hiring on an impact sourcing strategy without calling that for a number of years. It wasn't an intentional strategy initially for us because we've been doing it for so long. But what we have done is try to formalize our processes around that and share best practices in new markets. So as I mentioned earlier, this is our definition at the top here. We've been recruiting disabled and socioeconomically disadvantaged youth under age 26 for years. And a lot of times we find that we need to do some pre-training before they actually join to give them the minimum skills to be prepared for the client training that we would put them through. So in 2014, Teleperformance committed to creating 5,000 impact sourcing jobs over the following 5 years with an annual target of 1,000 hires annually worldwide. But just within 2 years, we have surpassed that goal, and we are greater than 25,000 impact sourcing hires. And here I've highlighted some of the top countries in which we found impact sourcing hires to be a key part of our strategy. Guyana is fairly new for us, but we have 459 hires there today. We've got Egypt, India, Mexico, and Philippines are our largest areas of impact sourcing, and then we've got Tunisia as well. Now I'll move on to some of our key success stories. So I have not shared their names because I don't want to lose these folks to any competition or any headhunters. So very proud of these folks. Here we have a young lady who joined us under the age of 26 without a college degree. She went on to complete her bachelor's degree while working for us, and she now is a site operations manager out of our Guadalajara area office. She has been with the same client for 10 years, so very stable and steady relationship with our clients and very high satisfaction scores there. She has experience in multiple lines of business and very extensive training across our industry, and she has stayed with our company for 10 years. Our next success story is from the Human Resources function, near and dear to my heart. She joined us in a similar way. In fact, all of these folks that I'm going to share with you today joined under the age of 26 without a college degree. We also have a large group of disabled employees in Mexico who have been with us with deep tenure as well that the team shared with me. We've got a variety of disabilities and long tenure with those folks as well. But back to this young lady. She has actually completed her bachelor's degree and is working on completing her MBA. She currently leads the recruiting and selection departments for 5 major cities and is responsible for hiring more than 15,000 people yearly. Additionally, she serves as a regional internal auditor, and when I say regional, I mean for a third of the entire company, so very large role and one that comes with a lot of trust and respect. She's grown with the company from agent to her current role, and she's a great example of someone who we invested in, and she has also invested in us. Moving on to our next slide, we have a gentleman here who is now our Regional Operations Director. He went on to complete his MBA and bachelor's while he worked for Teleperformance. Additionally, he was a TPU University graduate. TPU is our kind of internal executive MBA program. The top 15 leaders within the company will go through an intensive 5-week international training session that's spread across 5 different countries, and he was a graduate of that. Another good example of long tenure. So you can see 16 years of tenure with our company. So this is long before impact sourcing was a thing. And then we've got one more gentleman who also joined and then went on to complete his bachelor's and MBA. He currently leads human capital strategy for 3 cities and serves as our senior human capital manager. He's been recognized with Excellence Awards and Values Advocate Award in 2013. And he led his country through the Great Place to Work certification process, which is a great honor. So I'm not sure if we open it up for questions now or if we hold that for the end, but thank you for letting me share some success stories about impact sourcing at Teleperformance, and I'll give you a view into where we are doing impact sourcing and how important it is to our business strategy.
Right. Thank you very much, Carla, for that introduction and some really interesting cases there on impact sourcing in practice. That's very interesting to hear. We'll be now spending the last section of this webinar on the Global Impact Sourcing Coalition. So I would like to give you an introduction to some of the work that we have done to date and also some background on the organization. As John mentioned in his introduction, the Global Impact Sourcing Coalition was launched in September last year, where also my organization, BSR, came on board as the secretariat of this initiative. Since then, we have been working to set up the governance structure of the coalition. So this means setting up an operational charter and policy documents. And we're now also putting together a steering committee consisting of representatives from our members. The mission of this coalition is really to advance wide-scale adoption of impact sourcing as a way to build more inclusive global supply chains. We want to build a global market for impact sourcing and also move away or at least expand the scope of this practice beyond philanthropy into more of the viable business practice that makes also business sense and also makes social progress possible. We have identified a number of objectives for the coalition that we are working towards to reach our mission. And I will go through all of them and also a bit more in detail on the following slides. But let me just summarize them here shortly. First of all, we are working to develop a global standard and assurance system for impact sourcing. As I mentioned in the beginning, there have been a number of different definitions and ways of doing impact sourcing in the marketplace. So our objective is to really come up with one definition and one standard for impact sourcing. And also to have companies adopt a standard like this and also have buyers use a standard, a new standard. We need to build capacity and we need to provide tools and resources for these companies to actually adopt the standard. So this is one of our second objectives, to build company capacity to scale impact sourcing. And this is very much on a needs basis, and this is done in dialogue with our membership to see what needs do they have, where are their gaps, and how can the membership and the coalition contribute. Thirdly, we notice, as I mentioned, BSR, we are a global non-for-profit. We work with a network of about 250 global multinationals, and when we go out and speak at conferences and so on with the private sector, we see that there's still quite low awareness around impact sourcing. So we see it as a key objective for this coalition to really raise awareness around impact sourcing, to create demand in the marketplace for uptake of impact sourcing, also beyond the BPO sector. We do this through communication, events and conferences and so on. And we also do this by demonstrating the value of inclusive business hiring practices like impact sourcing. We do this by commissioning research and by developing business cases together with our members on the value of impact sourcing. So production of reports and communication is also really a key part for us to achieve our mission. The final objective for the coalition is to build partnerships and ecosystem capacity. And by this, we mean to work with other stakeholders, such as the civil society, training institutions, and governance, to tear down the current barriers that exist for implementing wide-scale impact sourcing. So this can be done through partnerships, it could be done through collective action efforts, and it could also be done through advocacy on how we can actually improve the business environment for doing impact sourcing. So this is one of the key platforms for this coalition. And let me speak briefly about the activities we have done to date. As I said, we were set up in September 2017, and our key objective for this year is really to work to deliver a standard on global impact sourcing. So we have put together a working group consisting of member companies who have been drafting and providing feedback on what the standard could look like. And together with this standard, we're also looking at what tools and other guidelines, manuals, how-to guides and so on do we need to provide for companies to be able to adopt and uptake this standard. Secondly, we've been actively raising awareness about impact sourcing. We speak at industry conferences, we organize our own events, and we also publish articles and similar to raise awareness among industry stakeholders, but also among governments, among civil society and others who have a strategic interest in inclusive hiring practices. We also work with research and to build the business case. Last week we had a how-to guide published, which provide guidance on how you can work and employ, train people with autism. That was published together with Microsoft, one of our member companies. We have also done a review of what the current research on impact sourcing look like. This is available all through our homepage as a guide for companies to resort to on when they want to find manuals and best practices in certain areas. And finally, we also work with governments and have a lot of interest from governments to work with us. We have engaged with governments from Colombia, South Africa, Philippines, Jamaica, and others who have a keen interest in impact sourcing locally. And we see this as a quite strategic avenue that we can pursue in the long term. Let me now spend some time and just introduce you to the impact sourcing standard that we have been working on. So the standard is really the key deliverable for us to create a market for impact sourcing. And this standard would provide requirements and guidelines that can be used consistently to ensure that buyers and providers share the same expectations about impact sourcing. This standard is primarily, or it is for suppliers of impact sourcing work. So this standard is for organizations that are directly employing impact workers. And it's also a minimum requirement standard that sets out some minimum requirements that a provider of impact sourcing sourcing services should live up to. So for the supplier, this standard sets out a number of requirements on policies, systems, practices that the suppliers need to have in place in order to comply with this standard. So this is a way to create transparency of what impact sourcing means in practice on a rather detailed level. And it's also a way to create confidence for the buyer who is actually buying impact sourcing services to understand what services am I actually buying, what social impact can I expect to get out of the impact sourcing I am buying. Secondly, by having a standard, it will also be possible for buyers to more in detail evaluate the providers based on the standard and how well they comply with the impact sourcing standard. The current standard has been drafted by the members, and we now have a second draft available. It will go out for external consultations later this year, involving a number of stakeholder groups, such as people from vulnerable groups and also impact workers themselves, but also experts on inclusive hiring practices and experts on standard development and so on. This is currently a self-assessment standard. So we are asking the providers to conduct a self-assessment of how well they comply with the standard. This may, in the longer term, evolve into a certifiable standard where you can use third parties to assure that you are in compliance with the standard. However, as a first step, we want to launch the standard, and we want to make sure that there is an interest and uptake of this standard before we take further actions in certification. But that is also more of a long-term goal of the standard. And the standard itself is a very practical document. We have developed it based on the number of areas that track an employee's life cycle within the company. So by looking at the standard, you will see that there are specific requirements related to how you recruit and hire your staff, how you remunerate and provide benefits to your staff, and also how you train and provide career development to your staff. And the idea with the standard is not only to state requirements, but also to provide best practice guidelines. So together with the standard, we're also pointing companies towards resources that are useful for them to actually fulfill the standards. And that's also the idea with the coalition, that we jointly can exchange best practices and actually move the needle and raise the bar on this type of inclusive hiring practice in this business by collaborating, essentially. The standard is, as I said, intended for providers. The buyer side is as important. It will come in the next step, though. So we are looking at developing also tools for buyers that can help them champion and promote impact sourcing internally in their organization. So this would be in the form of bias principles or other tools that could be used within procurement, setting procurement targets around having certain amounts of impact workers, for example, when you do your procurement and so on. And so both the provider and the buyer side is really key to make this work, as we are trying to really build and expand this market. I'm happy to take further questions about the standard. I'm sure there could be some. It's a rather detailed and interesting process. But before we open up for questions, I would just like to give you some brief notes about how you can join the Global Impact Sourcing Coalition, and also why companies are joining this initiative. First of all, we see companies joining because they want to learn more about impact sourcing. They want to learn from their peers, and they also want to learn what is best practice in this field. Companies are also joining to inform and shape the new standard that we are developing, to have a saying of what should the standard look like, and also to have a saying about what tools do I need in my company to actually promote and implement impact sourcing. Also, this is a platform for communication, and the Impact Sourcing Coalition is a way for companies to distinguish themselves among your clients and customers, and the efforts you're making to build a more inclusive economy. And we are also providing a communication platform in the sense that we are speaking at events together with companies. We are providing resources for companies that are members who would like to speak and promote impact sourcing, both internally in their organization and externally at events and so on. And companies that are joining, they are asked to sign a statement of commitment, saying that they are committed to the mission and the vision of this coalition. As I said in the beginning, we welcome both companies that are new to impact sourcing, and we welcome those that have already implemented this for quite a while. Membership comes with a fee, and it depends on your annual revenue. So it starts at $1,500 per year and goes up to $5,000 per year, depending on your annual revenue. And the membership fee applies for regular members. So this applies for buyers and providers of impact sourcing services, while those organizations that fall in the associate membership category, such as non-for-profits, universities, and other stakeholders, has membership free of charge. After this call or after this webinar, we will be sending out further details about the coalition, about how you can join, and so on. So we can also take this offline. But I would now like to open up, or maybe I should just hand back to Kim actually to lead the Q&A session for the whole presentation. So over to you, Kim. Thank you.
Okay, I do see one question that came in from Mary Lewis. Can any of the presenters discuss impact sourcing domestically? For example, USA, our company does limited business overseas due to our being a federal contractor.
No, we see a lot of companies investing domestically, especially in the US. I think John has a few good examples, for example, how this has been done in veteran societies and so on. Maybe, John, you could give some examples?
Yes, thanks, Martin. A few examples come to mind. There really is a strong case for impact sourcing in the US. This doesn't have to be an offshore solution, because we see areas of very high youth unemployment, for example, in some of the cities. There's lack of opportunities, for example, in Native American reservations that we look at, and even in the BPO area, in call center and back office work, there are specific companies that focus on hiring impact sourcing workers, and impact sourcing workers in the United States might be a little bit different from in other countries, but it's those that may not have the opportunity in this established market. They may not have the opportunity to actually get a good job. We think of disabled veterans. We think of spouses of active military who have a very difficult time getting work because of the nature of sometimes they have to travel from place to place. I mentioned Native American reservations. There are a couple of examples right now where BPO work is being done in partnership with the tribal councils to create new jobs. I can think of 15 Native American reservations in the United States with unemployment rates of over 80%. And so when you think about the opportunity to make an impact and make a difference, so there's several examples like that, and there's several impact sourcing companies that do work focused on the United States.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions? I'm monitoring it. I don't see anything coming in at the moment. Oh, yep, here's one. How prevalent is impact sourcing in the Caribbean at this time? Can any of you take that?
I can add to that. Yes, and when you look at specific Caribbean nations, again, you see the characteristics of high youth unemployment and lack of job opportunities that lead to good career development. So we've done some work in Jamaica, in Barbados, and Trinidad towards creating BPO jobs in these areas. And because, like I said, one of the things I said earlier is BPO jobs, they do provide an entry-level job to start with and a potential to develop a career path. And that's one of the reasons we like the BPO industry. If there's any specific questions about specific countries, I'm happy to address that if I have information.
This is Carla. I have some direct experience in Jamaica that I'd like to share from a startup. It was a new market for us. This was a previous BPO company that I worked for, and my team led the hiring and selection process for the initial batch, and we were overwhelmed with joy at the recruiting process in Jamaica. People lined up for hours. We had way more participation than we ever expected, and they showed up in suits and ties and waited in the heat, and we're very thankful for the opportunity. So that was a very pleasant experience for me personally with impact sourcing hiring in Jamaica.
Thank you, Carla. Okay, let's see. We've got some questions coming in. Could the presenters talk about the training duration and any attrition issues? Anybody?
Maybe Carla can address the training duration, but I can tell you from my experience and the Everest group that did a study last year about impact sourcing, that because you're creating a more loyal workforce and you're lifting people out of poverty and their families, you tend to see much lighter worker attrition that you would see in traditional workers. And so we see attrition rates, it varies, but by as much as half of what traditional workers are. It does depend on what the location is.
And this is Carla, that has been true in our experience here at Teleperformance. Some of the challenges in the markets might be unique to that market. They may need some help with transportation or certain specific challenges to their market, but generally much lower attrition and higher job satisfaction. The training duration, I'll take that one. For us, it really depends on what type of business we're putting into that market. Is it chat, email? Is it transactional back office processing work? But generally what we're finding is that we are able to find with the basic skills in the markets that we go into, generally the English is strong in those markets. But we may have to have some accent neutralization training. We may need to introduce them to our particular tools in which we manage our calls and our customer data. So what I'm saying is, surprisingly, most of the basic skills that we can find, it's more specific to the challenges with the specific client, and there may be some language accent neutralization that we need to work on as well.
Just to add to that, again, drawing from the study that we did late 2016, we see attrition rates that are lower, and this actually leads to a lower total cost of ownership in general. We found about 3 to 10% less annually. Now, and Carla's correct. Sometimes it takes extra training up front because you're introducing them to business concepts that might be commonplace for more traditional workers. But we found that the 3 to 10% less cost comes from the savings specifically related to reduced attrition, because they over time they get higher levels of proficiency, and they tend to stay longer on the job. So you have less recruiting and training for new employees as a result.
Great, thank you, John and Carla. We have a question from Justin Chen. Could the presenters provide suggestions on how an individual can guide a greater organization toward utilizing impact sourcing? And I'm not sure who to point this at.
Let me start the conversation. Oh, go ahead, Carla.
Yeah, I didn't quite absorb that question. Can you state that one more time?
Sure. Could you provide suggestions on how an individual can guide a greater organization toward utilizing impact sourcing?
Let me start the conversation on this. Looking at it from two different perspectives. One is a BPO provider. There's a lot of things that can be done, no matter how large or small the business. And so providers, if they agree that this is good and it's a good way to differentiate their company, the first thing is to let their clients know that they're embracing the model. A lot of BPO companies already do some type of unintentional impact sourcing. So we're asking them to formalize it and measure it, and then set an example for others to follow. A couple of ways that come to mind are to, a lot of times BPO providers will hire workers from staffing companies because of the staffing pool. And there are staffing companies that intentionally seek out impact sourcing workers. And in most major markets, these are available. And so one step is for providers to actually do that. Another thing from a provider perspective, you can partner with, in emerging markets, partner with college campuses to provide jobs to students in these countries so they can afford to stay in school. And we like to encourage providers to set an overall goal of hiring at least 5% of their new staff, making that impact sourcing workers, and then create a plan and make it happen within a couple of years. Now, on a buyer perspective, there really should not be any extra cost in hiring impact sourcing workers when you're outsourcing this, because of the cost neutral thing that we think is in play here. But we encourage buyers to ask their providers to seek out and hire these kinds of candidates, and to consider making it one of their differentiators in an RFP when they're putting out a set of work for business, is to ask for what their plan is to hire impact sourcing workers. Again, this 5% rule of just starting with 5% impact sourcing jobs it will take off from there.
Thank you, John. I don't see any more questions. I don't know, Martin, do you want to, you have anything to add?
No, I think we covered this all very well, and I'm glad to see a lot of good questions here coming in.
Oh, I think we have time for, we have one more question I see. How will AI technology change the impact sourcing job market?
That's a good question. I'll take a stab at the first start of this one. This is Carla. Here at Teleperformance, technology has allowed us to expand impact sourcing into the U.S. So to that question earlier, in our webinar about how do we handle this in the U.S. Technology has enabled us to go beyond the call center, brick and mortar, into areas where we can do more impact sourcing hires in the U.S. Technology today versus 25 years ago certainly allows us to reach out to people and hire in even the developing countries much more effectively. So many mobile apps related to hiring that help us reach people in a much better way than we were able to 10 or 15 years ago.
That's awesome. Thank you. Okay. Any last questions? It's noon. I think that's it for us. I did want to take one last moment to just give a little IAOP plug. If you're in the Chicago area, we do have a meeting tonight. Get over there and get to that. We have Voice of the Customer for the buyer side. We have a webinar coming up June 28th. We have a COP Masterclass and Governance Workshop happening also in Chicago next week, June 19th. I think there's still a couple seats available to that if you're interested in training. Texas and Women Empowerment. We're launching a meeting. We're launching the Women Empowerment chapter there in Texas on July 20th. We have Kate Vitasic as our guest speaker. We're doing a RPA conference one-day deep dive in New York City, September 15th. And then, of course, back in Florida for OWS 18 in February. Hope to see you guys at some of that stuff. If you have any questions, just reach out to us. We're here and happy to help. And as for these slides, we will get these to you, to all attendees of this webinar following this webinar. It probably won't be today, but we will get them to you ASAP. Also, the playback of this webinar will be available at IAOP.org. So thank you, Martin. Thank you, John. Thank you, Carla. Thank you, everyone who joined us today, and especially thank you to Debbie. And have a great day.